LiberalViewer presents.
So I want to move on to oral arguments about marriage equality in the U.S. Supreme Court this week. The Supreme Court is expected to find that marriage equality is a constitutional right, that the fundamental right to marry extends to same-sex couples. And I'm going to show 4 clips on this, including a couple from right-wing wacko Tony Perkins from the Family Research Council. But first, I want to show an introductory report from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Their reporter, Jonathan Karl, reported on the case at the Supreme Court in this clip.
Sex marriage. Oral arguments Tuesday at a time of remarkable change, with 37 states now permitting same-sex marriage. ABC's John Karl is covering this landmark case.
The case that could spark an historic Supreme Court ruling imposing same-sex marriage on all 50 states started out with a simple request from a couple in Ohio. Jim Obergefell's husband was dying of Lou Gehrig's disease. Jim was told he couldn't be listed as a surviving spouse because Ohio wouldn't recognize their Maryland marriage.
Being able to marry John was the happiest moment of my life. It made a difference having that legal document that recognized us as a couple.
Now it all comes down to how these 9 men and women read the 14th Amendment's guarantee of due process and equal protection under the law. Do those words give gays and lesbians the right to marry? And if not, do they at least require states to recognize marriages like Jim Obergefell's from other states? It's an issue where views have changed sharply in an incredibly short time. From the president 7 years ago,
marriage is the union between a man and a woman,
to 3 years ago.
I think same-sex couples should be able to get married.
And the public has shifted dramatically too. On Thursday, an ABC News Washington Post poll with a new record. 61% of Americans say gays should be allowed to marry. A total flip from 2004, when a nearly identical percentage opposed same-sex marriage. But Sharif Gerges, who wrote a brief supporting traditional marriage, says this is not about discrimination.
This isn't about limiting anyone's personal liberty or controlling anyone's love life. It's about upholding a particular ideal to give kids the best shot at being reared by their own mom and dad. This is exactly the kind of issue the court should leave to the people, to the states.
Most conservatives will be closely watching Justice Anthony Kennedy, a Reagan appointee who 2 years ago was the key vote knocking down the federal ban on same-sex marriage. Will he be the deciding vote again, this time making marriage equality a constitutional right? For This Week, Jonathan Karl, ABC News, Washington.
So I thought that was a really good overview from Jonathan Karl on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and they followed that up with a discussion between a proponent of marriage equality and an opponent of marriage equality, which I'm not going to show any clips from that, even though it was kind of an interesting discussion. If you want to see the whole thing, there's a link down in the video description to the whole This Week program, which you can probably access. I don't think you need to have a cable show or a cable subscription, although sometimes it asks for mine. But anyway, I do want to show another interesting clip on marriage equality. This is from NBC's Meet the Press, and an interesting thing about the NBC coverage is they actually didn't have an opponent of marriage equality, even though both people who they had on were on the side I agree with. I think it's a little bit biased not to have an opponent of same-sex marriage on the program when the case is up and they're talking about it's a liberal and a conservative. It's David Boies and Ted Olson, who argued against each other on Bush v. Gore. One's a Democrat, one's a Republican, but they're the two that teamed up to be on the side of marriage equality in the Prop 8 case here from California. Anyway, here's David Boies and Ted Olson answering a question I hear a lot online in comments posted to my videos, or having discussed this over many years, about why marriage equality for same-sex couples doesn't lead to polygamy. It's actually kind of a silly question, and you can hear both of them give really good arguments as to why it's not the same as marriage equality for same-sex couples. Talking to Chuck Todd over here.
Mr. Roy, what about and you hear this argument from the right that says, okay, same-sex marriage is going to become constitutionally legal, let's say the Supreme Court does this, then what, can you constitutionally ban polygamy? You know, I mean, you know this is where this is going to go. How do you constitutionally ban polygamy?
Well, first of all, that's a silly argument. It really is. This has to do with equal rights. What we're saying is that you can't deprive a loving couple of marriage simply based on their sexual orientation. Just like you can't deprive a loving biracial couple of the right to get married. The Supreme Court held that many, many years ago. What you have in the polygamy case is situations where you're going to have multiple partners. And there's all sorts of evidence that that has harmful effects on some of the people participating and on the children. So there's a policy reason. But more important, there's a legal reason. And that is you're not discriminating against anybody. Everybody gets to have one spouse. Right. As long as you don't restrict it based on race, gender, sexual orientation, everybody's treated equal under the Constitution. What you can't do is you can't say some people are second class. And so some people can marry the person they love, one man, one woman, but two men, two women, they can't get married simply because of their sexual orientation or their gender. That's what's unconstitutional about it. The polygamy thing has nothing to do with it.
The overwhelming evidence in the case that we tried is that sexual orientation is something that's an immutable characteristic of an individual. Choosing to have multiple spouses is a choice. It's not a part of an innate characteristic. So we're discriminating against people because of their sexual orientation. Polygamy has nothing to do with it.
All right, I'm going to make you...
So, like I said, I think all those arguments were good distinctions between marriage equality for same-sex couples and the issue of polygamy, though I'm not sure that polygamy should be not protected by the Constitution under, like, religious liberty, possibly. I'm still not sure that polygamists shouldn't get constitutional protections by a set of different arguments than same-sex couples should get. I mean, they should obviously, just under equal protection and under rational basis analysis, there's no reasonable basis for excluding them from the current marriage benefits between any two people should be able to get married, and discriminating on the basis of the gender or sexual orientation doesn't even have a rational basis, and so is unconstitutional under the Equal Protection Clause. But speaking of rational bases, I want to show someone who isn't completely rational on this issue, Tony Perkins from the Family Research Council. Family Research Council has been called by the Southern Poverty Law Center as a hate group because of their really strident anti-gay stance. They're not quite to the level of the Westboro Baptist Church, the so-called, or you see them sometimes holding up like the God Hates Fag signs at funerals, but they're pretty close to that. And Bob Schieffer had on Tony Perkins on Face of the Nation this morning, and actually it started with a little introduction about people lining up to see the Supreme Court case, and then mentioned how the Family Research Council has been called a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, and you can see Tony Perkins' response to that over in this clip.
Here's something you don't see very often in Washington. These people have been lining up all weekend in hope of getting a seat in the Supreme Court arguments scheduled for Tuesday. This is a case that could ultimately settle whether the right to marry someone of the same sex is constitutionally protected. We're going to hear from both sides. Evan Wolfson is the head of Freedom to Marry, a group that's lobbied for gays to marry. He's in New York this morning, but I'm going to start with probably the most vocal opponent of same-sex marriage, and that is Tony Perkins. He is the president of the Family Research Council. And Ms. Perkins, I'm going to say this to you up front. You and your group have been so strong in coming out against this and against gay marriage that the Southern Poverty Law Center has branded the Family Research Council an anti-gay hate group. We have been inundated by people who say we should not even let you appear because they, in their view, quote, you don't speak for Christians. Do you think you have taken this too far?
No, Bob, we stand, well, first of all, let me say thank you for allowing us to continue to have this discussion, because I think it's a discussion that's going to continue on, regardless of what the court says. The court is not going to settle this issue. In fact, I think it does a disservice to both sides if the court weighs in on public policy like this. The courts are decided to interpret the Constitution and the constitutionality of laws, not create public policy. When they do that, they create division and they erect barriers to reaching consensus on public policy like this. And so, no, we stand with millennia of experience that the union of a man and woman, the sacred union of marriage, is the cornerstone of society. That's where kids learn to become citizens.
I don't know. We stand with millennia. Is he admitting that he's like from some previous? Which millennia is he from? Is it from? I guess we're starting a new millennium now. So, is he from the first millennium, the second millennium, or I guess we're now in our third post Jesus millennium, if that's how you count your time. That should be how he counts his time, right? Tony Perkins from the Family Research Council. And I want to show one more clip from him that I thought was especially ridiculous, where Bob Schieffer confronts him with one of his statements about how if the Supreme Court finds in favor of a right for marriage equality, that it'll be open season on people of faith. And he talks specifically about this case of a baker in Oregon, that somehow he thinks baking goods for a wedding means participating in the wedding, which I think is really bogus, as I'll discuss after you see that clip over here.
Well, you said the other day, and I believe these are your words, if the court rules in favor of gay marriage, it would be open season on people of faith.
Absolutely.
I mean, how can you say that?
Oh, I can say it very clearly. When this is what's at stake here, Bob. This is not about the marriage altar. This is about fundamentally altering the culture. Just on Friday, a bakery in Oregon was fined $135,000 for not refusing to serve gay people, but simply saying, we cannot participate in a same-sex wedding because it violates our Christian faith. $135,000. Within hours, though, about $100,000 was raised for this couple until gay activists demanded that GoFundMe take down their site.
Well, gay activists demanded they take down the GoFundMe site because GoFundMe has a policy that they don't allow people to fund violations of the law, and this baker was fined for discriminating against customers and violating an anti-discrimination law. And how is that participating in a wedding? I mean, I got married. There was a baker that made our wedding cake, and I think we had a couple other things, something called a croquant bouche. And I remember meeting with the guy, this French pastry chef who made the wedding cake before the wedding, and then he made the cake and we took it to the wedding, and I don't remember the baker participating in the wedding in any way. The baker was not at the wedding, did not participate in the wedding. We bought a cake and possibly these like pastry, these like cream puffs in a big pyramid called a croquant bouche, but I don't remember the baker participating in our wedding in any way. So you let me know down in the comment section. What do you think? Does a baker making a wedding cake actually have a religious liberty claim that he or she is being forced to participate in the wedding? And on the bigger question before the Supreme Court, do the due process and equal protection clauses of the U.S. Constitution guarantee to same-sex couples the fundamental right to marry guaranteed to opposite-sex couples?
YouTube, you decide.